This guy says the horse can do. If he says the horse can do, can do.
Welcome to Odds and Ends, and I'm your host, Mike Tice. This will be our second NFL Draft Preview show. Hey, I want to put a little notation out there that my guests, including my son Nate, and hopefully we'll have another guest on, a surprise guest on Wednesday. We do not have access to any NFL medical reports on these players coming out of college. We do not have any character reports. We don't know which players have been dinged because of character. All of the rankings that we do and my guests do and I do are based on video study or actually going to the games in 2019 or watching a game on television. So that's how we have made our rankings and how we put our comments together on these athletes. So hopefully you'll enjoy that as we proceed forward this week. I also want to put out there with this COVID-19 epidemic that all of my friends around the country and family are safe, especially my relatives in New York, my aunts and my uncle, my cousins, Jimmy Burke and that whole crew. Also, my sister Mo and her husband and family, Jim Panagos, who is a defensive coach for the Rutgers, University of Rutgers. I want to make sure you guys are all safe. I do know my friends and coaches around the NFL are doing virtual coaching right now. They say that the type of programs that they're getting to use are going to change the game. We'll see what happens with that. But Bobby Johnson from the Buffalo Bills, Todd Downing and Rob Moore from the Tennessee Titans, Nick Holes from the Oakland Raiders, Wade Harmon from the Denver Broncos, Kenny Pollard from the Minnesota Vikings, and my many friends that are with the Minnesota Vikings. Also, I want to say Bob Babich, our prayers and thoughts are with you. He lost his mom this week. So, Bob, our prayers and thoughts are with you and your mom and your family as you proceed forward. It's never an easy time. So, we'll be back in a minute with more of Odds and Ends. Be healthy, be safe. You're at home or you're on your phone, so watch the show. Hopefully you'll learn something, and I certainly did learn something from listening to my son Nate talk about those wide receivers on our first show. We'll be back in a minute with more of Odds and Ends and the offensive line in this year's first round of the NFL Draft.
This guy says the horse can do. If he says the horse can do, can do, can do.
Well, welcome back to Odds and Ends, and of course I have my favorite guest of all time with me twice in a couple of days here, and maybe three times before the draft on Thursday. That's my son Nate Tice. Nate, how we doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be back as always. I think I've been to your studio up there once or twice in the last few years. So good to see it from this perspective as a guest.
Yeah, and it's exciting with the draft coming up. You did a great job with the wide receivers in our first NFL draft show. Today, you're going to come back and talk about quarterbacks a little bit, but now it's my turn. I want to talk about the first round offensive lineman, but really just focus in on the tackles that could go in the first round. There could be one guard or two or a center that could pop up there in the top 32. But let's talk about the tackles because that's where it's all about. There's probably, Nate, 6 guys that I see could go in the first round or might definitely go in the first round. And that's kind of how I see it based on our film study.
Yeah. Well, let's just get right to it. I mean, how do you see it stacking up? I mean, I know a lot of these guys is kind of the flavor that you're looking for. So I'm really curious of what flavor you pick in the buffet line.
Well, the flavor I like is athleticism, change of direction, lateral movement, quickness, tight hands and pass protection. Unfortunately, you're not going to see a player in this draft anyway that has all of those attributes, but you are going to see some players that have quite a few that check off that list. And I'm going to start with Mekhi Becton from Louisville, left tackle, 6'7", 365 pounds, very long. Has a long reach, almost 36, well, not really almost 36 inches, 35 3/8 inches. Here's a kid that plays with really good tight hands in the run game, Nate. He's got great feet. He's athletic as all can get out for a guy that big. He's really, really good for all of those zone teams out there in the NFL, which there are a lot of them. He's really good on the front side of the outside zone play. I really like his sets and his ability to change direction, Nate. Basketball player. So, basketball player and wrestlers tend to make good offensive linemen in the National Football League. He's really good at the point of attacking the run game. I actually see this player, Mekhi Becton, Nate, as a better run player at this point, but also a very steady pass protector, really gets back nice and square and patient. And of course, he's long and he plays a bit nasty. He plays a bit nasty. So Mekhi Becton from Louisville would be my first ranked offensive tackle in this Thursday's draft.
I have a couple kind of questions, just kind of like what I've gone off of what I've seen with Becton. I've seen him compared, and you might be the best one to actually maybe compare and contrast. I've seen him compared to Bryant McKinnie online, and I'm actually curious because you drafted Bryant McKinnie in the first round. So I'm actually curious how, as a prospect, does he compare to Bryant, to Big Mac? Does he contrast from him? Is there any comparisons at all other than just size? I'm actually really curious what your thoughts on that is.
Well, we were very blessed to get Bryant McKinnie when I was with the Vikings. He had a nice career for us that ended up finishing up with Baltimore or going to Baltimore to play. I think that Mekhi Becton is a better athlete. He's got better change of direction. Bryant always had some type of back issue going on throughout his career that he dealt with. I don't want to say the word stiff because Bryant was a good athlete, but I believe Mekhi Becton is an excellent athlete. So I think the biggest difference, Nate, is not in size because both men are extremely large.
Yes.
But I think the difference is in the athleticism, and I think Mekhi is a better athlete.
Okay, that's really. I was curious about that. I've been meaning to ask you it, so why not now?
Right.
And so just going along the line. Who would you have as your number 2 guy, or maybe your 2-3 guy, or if it's a different tier?
Yeah, I've been reading all the reports out there, all the mock drafts, some of which I respect, some of which I don't pay attention to. But, it's really hard for me to rank Tristan Wirfs from Iowa with that second lineman pick or even that first lineman pick because he is a right tackle, and we'll get to Tristan in a minute. But I like Andrew Thomas of Georgia, 6'5", 315 pounds. And you talk about long, Nate, he's 36 and an eighth. He's a left tackle, another left tackle. Extremely long, decent feet, really good tight hands in his pass protection and his pass pro, good on down blocks, decent on the front side of combinations in the run game, but he tends to get his hat involved in there a little bit, which causes him to get edgy on that second level. He's got enough athleticism, enough strength and power that he could use his hands and keep his eyes up and see that second level a little bit better. So I don't think it's something that he can't do. I just think something that he's got to work on to be a better pro. His combination blocks on the backside are good. He has good finish, and I like that. He's got good finish in the run game. I like his backside quickness. I mean, he does a nice job on the backside, which is very important for all those zone teams out there to have a tackle and get it done on the backside. So I'm really – the one thing that kind of bothers me a little bit, Nate, he's good with his sets, but occasionally he has issues with some inside moves. And there's a lot of guys out there that instead of staying square will get turned a little bit, and now that invites that inside move. But in my opinion, if the player is a good athlete, the player's willing, as it looks like Andrew Thomas is, he can get that fixed with some good drills by some good coaches. And there are a lot of good line coaches out there. And he's really good. He has good vision when it pertains to games. He can see that game coming, and he keeps those players away from him with those long arms. So my second player out there, Nate, would be Andrew Thomas from Georgia.
And Thomas is a hell of a player. I mean, he came into to college pretty touted, and he stepped in day one as a good player for Georgia. I was kind of curious too. I was actually talking to these two guys, and I just thought about that. And as you're talking about maybe with the games and stuff, is with Thomas and Becton, Georgia runs more of a traditional pro style scheme, even though NFL schemes are becoming so much more hybrid with college stuff. Is it easier to kind of project that as opposed to Becton? When I noticed with Louisville film, they have a fun offense, but a lot of it was slide protection and turn protection, full turn, I should say. Is there maybe some differences with or maybe easier to project for you or do you really not, you just know, okay, once he gets to the NFL, okay, we know he can do that. Maybe if he wasn't asked to do it 100 times in college, but is that always in the back of your mind a little bit when you're looking at these guys?
It is, Nate, but when I put that word athleticism in there, excellent change of direction,
Yes.
long arms, I see the player as being able to do that with a little better coaching in the pro ranks. Coaches, really get to spend more time on technique in the NFL as they do in college because of the limitation of time that you can spend with the players.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious about that. So going on, let's just keep going down the list. Who would you stack as maybe your third guy, or the next tier, or if you group a couple of these guys in the same tier and it's more of your flavor, if you're going for chocolate or vanilla, or strawberry. So who would you go next as your number 3 guy?
Well, I think all 3 of these guys I'm talking about are top 15 players. The next one, of course, I hinted is Tristan Wirfs, and one of the reasons I made him 3 is because he is a right tackle. Now, Tristan, we had on the show the other day, great interview, great kid. 2019 Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year, and that's saying a lot because basically the Big Ten is always loaded with really good offensive linemen. His numbers are good. He's 6'5", 320. 34 on his reach. So does that keep him from playing left tackle, or does that make him move inside? I see him as a right side player. He's got decent sets, a little inconsistent with his sets. He's got good pop most of the time, but he will tend to get his hands a little bit wide. Nice vision on the games. Good job on the backside and cutoff blocks, which is important again for all those zone teams. And he will throw his body around. He will cut block, which I like to see players get some of that on tape. And it shows you the type of toughness that he has. He gets a little edgy with quickness. And, his hands get wide, like I said, at times, which I think causes him to get a little bit edgy late. But this is a very good player, a hard worker. As you know, had a tremendous combine. His numbers were off the chart. And I think this player, Tristan Wirfs, because of his quality and because the type of young man that he is, and because he was an excellent wrestler in high school, state wrestling champ in Iowa, state discus champion as a sophomore, is a very good athlete.
Yes. Have you really graded maybe a guy that exclusively played on the right side in college as over the years, has there been a couple guys that are like only right tackles in college that ended up being good left tackles? The one that comes to my mind is Tyron Smith from the Cowboys, but that was because they had a first-round left tackle when he was in college. So is there any guys that you remember kind of scouting or coming out of college that maybe you're like, that ended up being good left tackles that you can recall? Or do you think that is something that's really hard to adapt to at the NFL level?
Well, Smith is one of those ones that does stand out. So that was a good hit right there. But, most of the time a player on the right side has to be on the right side, either because lack of that change of direction or because he's not long enough with his arms. I think Tristan could go in there and fill in as a left tackle, but I think he'll be a much superior player on the right side of an offensive line.
Gotcha. That's a great way to put it. All right, let's just keep on going. So this next tier, so you said that is kind of the same tier, and then that's how you look as the 1, 2, 3, and maybe your order. Is this next tier, would you project these guys as true first rounders? Are you saying late first, early second? But really, I'm just curious to go with kind of what these next couple guys might be.
Well, the next 2, I want to flip-flop. Probably the next 2 are not the way other people have them. But again, these are left tackles. I could see these 2 going either way, more falling in love with the second guy. The first guy is Austin Jackson, or the next guy, Austin Jackson from USC, 6'5", 322, 34 1/8, left tackle. The one thing that jumps off the screen on me about Austin Jackson is his competitive. He's very, very competitive. He's got excellent quickness. He's got really good active hands in the pass protection realm of it. He can run. I mean, this guy can run. He's a good athlete. Change of direction is good. He can recover. He will set short and not get back and get in trouble, but I've seen him turn around, sprint to the quarterback, and get that defender before the defender can hit the quarterback. He can recover. He's got great change of direction, good quickness on the backside of the run game. And as I said, I think he's better pass protector and he's a run blocker. At times he gets turned and that allows that speed to get up the field on him. But that's not something that concerns me because of the athleticism of this player, Austin Jackson from USC.
Okay. And then the next one, you mentioned there's two maybe in this tier that you're flip-flopping on.
Yeah, I'm flip-flopping, boy. I'm flip-flopping. I'm waffling, Nate.
That was me with the receivers. Midway through, I just changed my rankings as I'm talking in a sentence. So
I almost changed it before I said the name Austin Jackson, but I'm falling in love with the more film I see with Josh Jones from Houston. 6'5", 319 pounds, 33 7/8 reach, which scares me a little bit. He's a left tackle. He has a lot of good things going on. He's good patient in his sets, staying square. He can run, and they pull him a lot. He competes. He really competes. He's athletic. Very, as I said, nice square sets. So good job coaching down there at the University of Houston. Good vision on games. Nice job on the second level in the run game. Good lateral movement. He does not – the one thing that scares me about him, as much as I'm saying he's a competitor, as much I'm saying he's got good feet and change of direction, athleticism, I don't see him get back often or as much as he should in the pass protection, and he should get back a little deeper. But that doesn't scare me because that can be fixed. But he doesn't come off the ball at the point of attack in the run game. I like to see him come off the ball a little bit more aggressively in the run game. Again, another thing I like, he will cut. Good high, tight hands and pass protection. I think this is a player on the rise. I see him moving up on the board of some people as they watch more tape on this player, or is running out of time to watch tape. But I see this player as being an excellent pro and a player that can come in and help somebody at the left tackle position.
What's kind of funny about those last two guys too, because you mentioned both being better pass protectors and run blockers at this point, is with both of them, they both come in air raid offenses, which is kind of funny that you group them together, kind of have some similarities. I mean, not all encompassing, but it's kind of funny that you mentioned the same things, both coming from that type of offense with the offensive line stuff that they do, with how much they throw the ball, even though I would say, they run it a little bit more than a true old Mike Leach offense running when they used to throw it 72 times a game. But still go a little bit more. Still going down the list. Who would you go next after that? Those two.
Well, I probably disagree with a lot of people out there on the next player. Jedrick Wills from Alabama. Again, can't rank him higher than left tackles. This player does have enough athletic ability to play the left side. He's 6'4", 312, 34 1/4 inch reach. But he is a right tackle. He has very good run block technique in a lot of areas. Down blocks, deuce blocks, which are combination blocks on the front side. He has good work on the back side. Very good skills, technique in his cutoff blocks. Short sets, not bad. His feet are disciplined. So I'm saying a lot of good things. So why do you have him down here, Mike? Well, he's got a little bit of lack of explosiveness, and I think his finish is just okay. He's going to have to get with a coach that's going to help him finish better. It seems to me like his clock goes off a little bit early for me, where, okay, I've done enough, I'm going to stop. I'd like to see that change with this particular player. And again, he's a right tackle that I think can be projected over to the left side. There's issues. He has some issues with a quick redirect when he gets a quick inside or a quick edgy move by a defender. He has issues with that, as a lot of players do that are large, and he is another large man. But I see him as a sixth player. I do see him as a first-round pick, and that would be my half dozen, my 6 tackles that I see should probably all go in the first round at some point, and a couple of them I think are moving up late.
It's a fun group. I mean, it's a fun draft overall. So it's kind of fun when you're not just saying, oh, these guys are first rounders because there's nothing else. It's fun when the guys actually look like first rounders. I mean, any position, but especially offensive line. But yeah, so I mean, just a fun group, and I mean that's fun talking about each guy, and like I said at the beginning, it's different flavors. It's what do you prefer, and what are you gonna want on your team? So it's a fun group, and fun listening to you dive into each and every one. That sometimes I never get to hear that because we're talking about something else, like what's for dinner that night.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the players that have the ball in their hand all the time.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm a line drawer.
Only ones that have the ball in their hand all the time that I care about are the centers. And maybe I'll get a chance to talk about the centers and the inside guys before Thursday's draft. But I wanted to touch on these tackles because, like you said, with the wide receivers, this is a offensive tackle rich first round. This is a wide receiver rich first round. So we're able to talk about those players in our first two shows. A couple guys I like, later down the line I've been able to look at. Isaiah Wilson from Georgia. He's a right tackle, big, thick player. And then Ezra Cleveland from Boise State. I want to put a little shout out to Ezra. He's from Bethel High School here in Washington. He's from Spanaway, Washington. So I wanted to put a little shout out for Ezra Cleveland. But that's the list of guys I want to talk about. And hopefully the fans out there one of their teams will get one of these really good football players.
Absolutely. That's the fun of the draft is you can, especially the NFL draft, you can see these guys play on Sunday right away. They don't have to play in the minor leagues for a few years before you see them. You get to see them and they can be plus players right away. That's what's fun.
Well, especially all these big tackles, boy, get these guys on the field ASAP. So that's it. That's it for the first round offensive tackles. We'll be back in a minute with more of Odds and Ends, where Nate and I will talk about the top quarterbacks in this Thursday's National Football League College Football Draft. Well, welcome back to Odds and Ends. And now it's time to talk with Nate about the quarterbacks in the first round of the NFL draft and possible one or two players in that second round. And, I think the whole world knows, Nate, that Joe Burrow will either go to Cincinnati or could push down to that second pick. I don't see that. I think that Cincinnati will take the franchise quarterback, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. They could trade out of the pick. What are you hearing? You got your ear to the ground. What are you hearing about that? Would they trade out of that first pick, Nate?
I don't think they will. I think you take any chance you can on, especially Burrow. I would consider one of the more safer QB prospects that you can think of, maybe not only this year, but maybe the last couple of years. He has a very high floor. So I think as a team like the Bengals, where you're just trying to accumulate as much talent as possible, and anytime you can at least guarantee or try to guarantee yourself, I don't want to say it's a guarantee, an above average quarterback play, you got to take it. And I think with the Bengals, there was a couple moments, a couple stories where, Bengals might trade out of it because they don't want to pay it. And I think that's just all smoke and maybe, some agent play or, one guy said something to one person and then, how it goes, just things blow up. But I think the Bengals are just going to, hey, let's at least hit this double. Let's get Burrow on our team and just work from there. And I think that's very smart. And I think that's what you have to do with a franchise that's taking the number one pick.
An Ohio kid, staying in Ohio, Cincinnati, great tradition. But I tell you, I think that more than anything, if Joe Burrow goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, the happiest person on draft day will be our great friend Jack Del Rio with the Washington Redskins, because they're going to get a hell. They're going to get.
Yeah,
They're going to basically get a number one pick at number
yeah,
two.
yeah.
Talk
Basically,
about.
exactly.
I know we're
Yeah.
talking quarterbacks, but we'll talk about that for a second.
We'll talk about Chase Young, yeah, who's just a monster. Yeah, it's
Right.
one of those. I didn't even have to watch D-line. Of course, I watch Big Ten play, but it's anytime you watch Ohio State defense, it's like, oh, there's Chase Young making another play. Oh, it's
Yeah.
like, it's how much study do you need? As long as his off-field stuff's good, it's like, how much study do you need? And that's what you want in a number one pick, is where you can just watch 15 plays and go, oh yeah, that's good. Like, we're good here. So I think
Yeah.
they'll be pretty happy in Washington getting that falling onto their laps at number two.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I think you got two number one picks there, and I
Yeah.
don't mean first round picks. I mean number one picks. I mean,
Yes.
you get Young, that's great. You get Burrow, and you want to build a franchise around, that's great too. But I know that,
Exactly.
like I said, Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio will be very, very happy with
Yes, it
Young
will be.
with the second pick. But let's move on to your second quarterback in the draft. I see these two flip flop by a lot of mock drafts. One young man from Alabama, Tua, coming off a leg injury, and then Justin Herbert. How do you say that, Nate?
Just
Herbert.
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 Just Herbert. Yeah.
Her,
Just
out
an
of
Herbert.
Oregon. Out of Oregon, still I think has a way to go as a pro. Talk about those two players and where you see them. Who do you see first in that list, and go from there.
Yeah, maybe I'll just kind of dive into the next few guys. Tua merged onto the scene with the national championship game throw against Georgia, and the next couple of years just took and ran with that position. He's very polished. He plays with great balance. His footwork is good. He is a fast processor, at least in that offense. What you can tell is that he gets that ball out on the first read, and it seems the ball goes to where it's supposed to be going, which is what you want to see. And he might struggle a little bit when he has some pressure in his face, but I mean, most quarterbacks do. And again, when you're looking at first round quarterbacks, you're really looking for the least amount of blemishes, or can we coach out of those blemishes? And Tua does a lot of things that are hard to coach up in the first place, which is accuracy, good timing, and he's a pretty good athlete. But having said that, the injury concerns is really something that teams have to look at. And this process with what is going on around the world with the pandemic, the medical process isn't the same as it's been in previous drafts, which throws a whole nother curveball, a whole nother litany of questions. And to be honest, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to take a quarterback this year with a guy like Tua, who, if he was completely clean and healthy, and would be an pretty easy top 10 pick to make. It's just that's where the other stuff comes into effect. And going off of that, this next kind of tier of guys between Justin Herbert and Jordan Love from Utah State, and I kind of said the same kind of joke about the offensive line. It's your flavor. This is where interviews really come into effect, especially at the combine when you get these guys on a whiteboard. You get a guy like Herbert, who's at Oregon, and my comparison for him was Jason Campbell out of Auburn, who got drafted by the Redskins in the first round and bounced around the league for a while. I think you were with him in Chicago, where he was a backup with you guys. And he's a big, pretty looking quarterback, and he does some nice things, but he was a multi-year starter. But having said that, he played in several different offensive schemes with several different coordinators. This past year was the first time he returned the same play caller, play designer. And so that is something you have to kind of take into account when you watch him. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot. And for me, you have to project a lot with him. And that's kind of worrisome for me as a 4-year starter. You kind of don't want to see some of the things that he was struggling with. What he does do well, he's a big, athletic, got good arm. He can move. He can ad lib with his feet a little bit. He's not a scrambler, but he can move out of the pocket and create throws. And that actually is where he throws best, is when he's on the move, because he gets his footwork out of the equation. So I keep going back and forth between the positives and negatives with him. His footwork still needs work. He wishes a lot of throws open. He'll know where to go where number one is. It's not like his eyes are going side to side. He knows where to go with the ball with number one. The problem sometimes with him is getting to the number two, the number three, or even just going, hey, screw it, I'm running. It seems that he It's a term that Paul Chris is instilled in my mind. He wishes the throw open. And that causes his footwork to get out of whack because he's taking those 3 extra hitches trying to throw that ball open or try to throw that guy open. And as opposed to anticipating and maybe just seeing where number one is and then coming off of it and working through the progression. And that's something that it was a little worrisome to see for a guy that is a multi-year starter with a lot of games under his belt. But that's also where you have to learn, is it because of the scheme he was in? Was it because of not comfortability with the offense? And those are where interviews come into play.
Who do you think, as you already mentioned, the next group of guys, do you see Jordan Love as the definite number 4, or do you see maybe someone taking a flyer on a Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma up there?
I think Jordan Love is the next one up. And I'm sorry, what you were going to say?
I was going to say, or even Jacob Eason from the University of Washington.
Yeah, I would put Jordan Love as that next tier because I think Jordan Love has that what I call flash tape. He makes those 2, 3, 4 throws a game that are, I mean, honestly, jaw dropping. He throws a really nice, natural throwing motion, nice, pretty ball. He plays with a lot of confidence. You know, it's going to be funny saying this. I'm not comparing him to that talent level. He thinks he's Mahomes, though. Like, he plays with that swagger, that confidence, play in, play out, which is fun to see in a quarterback. It's one of those where he's like, no, come, I got you guys. Come on my back. Sometimes it gets him in trouble, though, where he's like, no, I can complete this. And it's a throw he shouldn't have been making ever, not even in practice. And with Jordan, it's like I said, it's the flavors. It's what you think you can coach into him or coach out of him. He does a lot of nice things, but then he does things like he doesn't see the second level defenders. There's a game against BYU where he threw 2, maybe 3 interceptions right at the linebackers on over routes and shouldn't be looking there to start with. So it's one of those things where you have to decipher, a team has to decipher, is that worth it? Is this something we can work with, or is this what he is? And again, I'm glad I'm not a team that has to take a guy in the first round this year or wants to take a guy in the first round, because there are those flash throws. So it's how much you believe in that that's sustainable, how much those throws can be more consistent. And one thing with him, I was saying with Herbert, will know to go to number 1. Love looks like sometimes he is looking side to side and going coast to coast with his eyes, and then all of a sudden going, oh, that guy's open, and he whips that ball in there. So it's, again, with this where interviews come into effect, it's how much you're looking at the scheme, looking at the talent around him. Is it because of him? Is it because of what he's being coached? And that's something you have to decipher. But, you know, he is a really fun prospect because he does have those plays that if you take him, you're crossing your finger that those 2, 3 plays become 12, 14, 15 plays every game in the NFL, which is hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what is your next, I probably touched on a couple of guys. What are your next couple of guys look like late, either late first rounders that sneak in the first round or second round players?
I would say that tier right there is the guys that I could see as first rounders. After that, you start getting into the Jacob Easons from Washington of the world, which I would be more comfortable more in the third to look at. He actually has a lot of the same qualities as Justin Herbert, where they're big, strong, surprisingly athletic, big guys that throw a nice, pretty ball. And with him he has kind of a strange career where he was pretty much the number 1 recruit in the nation. He went to Georgia he was from Washington, state of Washington, went to Georgia. After his 1 year starting there, he transferred back to Washington. So he doesn't have a ton of games under his belt. And really, honestly, probably would have benefited from another season of seasoning. And with him, it's that he also throws a nice ball. He's a big boy. But with him, it's he also doesn't progress. And it seems to me when Washington would game plan a concept for that defense they were facing that week, he struggled. But if it's a concept that he has run that you could tell that they run week after week and it's a base install play, like a mesh or a 4 verts or something that he has run dozens and dozens of times, he knows where to go with it. He sometimes, though, will struggle as well, just like Herbert, coming off that number 1 read. But with him, he is throwing it no matter what. So he's another guy that wishes the throw open. And again, that's where the interviews come into effect. I'm just repeating it over and over. Is that because of what he's being asked to do, or is that because what he does? And next after that is Jalen Hurts, who's the guy that Tua replaced at Alabama, and he ended up transferring to Oklahoma. By all accounts, unbelievable kid, tough as nails, and you could tell that in his play. Just from everyone that's ever talked about him, just says what a wonderful kid he is and what a hard worker he is, and you can tell like he is a competitive guy. With him, he's a guy when I watched during the season, I was like, oh, he's a running back playing quarterback. But then the more I watched him, he is not at that level of prospect, but he reminds me, he has some qualities. And again, this is like a Diet Coke version of Dak Prescott, where he's big, he can run a little bit, he throws, he's got a big over the top throwing style. He's not that same tier of prospect, I don't think, coming out, or what he could project to be, but I actually think he's a little better than I gave him credit for as a true quarterback. And really, he could be a fun guy if a team is creative with him. And I saw some people talking about Taysom Hill and all that. I don't think he's that level of an athlete that Taysom is. Taysom is 230 pounds, around a 4.4. Jalen's a little slower in that. But, you could get creative with him where you could have a package of plays and hope to develop him in a few years. And, and he's a fun, tough player. I mean, it's a guy you want in your program or in your organization, because day in, day out, he's going to work his butt off. And that's great to have.
Yeah, and I see him as a backup myself. But so those are your top 6 guys. We gave out the top 6 offensive tackles. I think that's a good dozen players that we gave our fans today. Great job on your reporting, as always.
Appreciate it.
Let's talk tonight. Let's see what we can put out there for our fans in our next NFL draft preview show. But that's going to be it for now from Nate, Tice, and I on our draft preview show number 2, The Deuce, out there. Have a great night, everybody. Please stay safe, stay at home and social distance, and we'll be back with more of Odds and Ends. Within the next couple of days, we'll push out some more NFL draft preview shows. Thanks for joining us, and stay home, stay safe.
Can do. I'm picking violence.